What's going on with y'all? This piece was brought to you by French Quarter Shops. They have everything you want in New Orleans, from the gear to the accessories, and I particularly recommend that you go and get a pack of New Orleans playing cards. I designed them myself, and they're available right now for only $10. So if you go to FrenchQuarterShops.com, you can go get that before they sell out. The city of New Orleans is filled with history, a history that spans across the 17 wars that divide the city. When attempting to get a full grasp of New Orleans history, a great place to start would be the Seven Ward. The Seven Ward stretches from the Mississippi River to Lake Pontchartrain and was once the epicenter for black advancement in the city. The Seven Ward has one of the richest histories in New Orleans. There are themes in the Seven Ward's history that need to be told to future generations. In this piece, I will explain how the Seven Ward came to be, as well as the features and landmarks. Then I will talk about the people that lived in the Seven. This will include stories about the Creoles of New Orleans and residents of the St. Bernard housing development, also known as the St. Bernard Projects. I will then talk about the notable figures who emerged from the Seven Ward, like Mia X, AP Turo, Manny Fresh, and Tyron Matthew. This will be followed by the story of Claiborne Avenue, explaining how the installation of a single highway single-handedly dismantled the most successful black business district in New Orleans. The Seven Ward is bordered by the 5th, 6th, and 8th Ward. The lower boundary is the Legion Fields Avenue, the border for the 8th Ward. And the southwest boundary is Esplanade Avenue, the border with the 6th Ward. Then from where Esplanade meets Bayou St. John, the boundary follows the bayou north to the lake, with the 5th Ward being across the bayou. The land known as the 7th Ward was once a portion of Claude de Bruley's estate. Bernard Maroney, a slaveholder and real estate developer, acquired the tracts of land in the late 1700s. Once he acquired the area, he created the Faubourg Maroney, the first suburb in New Orleans. Charles de Morand owned most of the remaining land in the 7th Ward, most of which was near the Treme. In the early days of the 7th Ward, things were very crowded because of limited resources. This led to many citizens leaving the 7th to build lives in other parts of New Orleans. The 7th Ward's lifestyle and family structure were created on a business-driven foundation. It was not uncommon as a 7th Ward resident for your neighbor to be a successful entrepreneur, musician, or trader. The family structure was a key component in its success. They practiced group economics, which kept money circulating within the communities.
The 7th Ward was always a neighborhood of community, no matter what part of the 7th Ward you went. I'm from the middle of the 7th Ward, St. Anthony between Roman and Prier. Then I had cousins from across the front. We used to call it front of town. That's where the Circle Food Store is at. Yeah. And then I had cousins from back of town. That's St. Aug and Epiphany side. So we were in the middle of that. But everybody in the 7th Ward was like family. The village really raised the children. We could not be disrespectful to elders. Our parents were not going to defend us if we were disrespectful to elders. If we was ruining property, littering. 7th Ward, every night when the street lamps came on, the ladies was outside with the hot water, the ammonia, bleach, scrubbing the porches.
There was a very healthy economy within the 7th Ward. During the mid-19th to early 20th century, there were successful family-owned businesses on every corner. The businesses ranged from laundromats to salons to funeral homes. Music was also a really big deal in the 7th Ward. Musicians from all over would come to New Orleans to train with locals and play at our clubs. Musicians from the 7th Ward were held in very high regard. They played for some of the wealthiest and powerful people in the world at the time.
Yeah, the 7th Ward, it was really, really like fun. I feel like the best years of my life was growing up as a child in the 7th Ward because, like I said, everybody was family. Yeah. People looked all kind of ways. You didn't know if somebody was white or if they was just bright. you didn't know unless you asked them, you know, or sometimes tried to dig deep into like last names.
Yeah.
But it was a fun place, you know. It was a place of community, and our house was like the juke joint house of the 7th Ward.
Used to be in there.
Fridays and Saturdays, we barbecued and broiled seafood and played cards and sold food and drinks, and that's the way our house was. And our house had been like that from like the late 40s all the way until 1993. It was a juke joint all them years.
The boom, boom, boom.
We really had the boom, boom, boom.
By the 7th Ward being the second largest ward in New Orleans, there are a lot of landmarks within its borders. The first landmark that I'm going to talk about is the New Orleans Fairgrounds Racetrack and Racino. The track was founded in 1838, making it the second oldest site for horse racing in America that's still open. Bernard Maroney, whom I mentioned earlier, was one of the main organizers of what was then called the Louisiana Racecourse. The track reopened in 1852 as the Union Racecourse. It closed again in 1857 after losing business to the Metairie Course. They attempted to rebrand the course by renaming it the Creole Racecourse, but shortly changed it to Fairgrounds in 1863. The track consists of a 1-mile dirt track with a grandstand, clubhouse, and slot machine gaming hall. The 7th Ward is also home to some of the finest schools that New Orleans has to offer. The first school on my list is Dillard University. Dillard University is an HBCU that once existed as two different schools.
So Strait was in 1868, and they combined with New Orleans College and became Dillard University in 1935. Dillard is, as they say, the jewel of Gentilly. We are a liberal arts institution, which is a wonderful foundation or academic program to be a part of, having a liberal arts education and background. It's well-rounded. Our students leave out of Dillard ready and prepared to take on communities, rebuild communities all over the world. We have students all over the world, in science, in English, and in writing and all. So we really do well in preparing our students to conquer. We've been around for over 150 years, which is very, very unheard of for a university to be around. So it's really exciting to be a part of history, to work, at this university, and for the people who started this university, which is to build the Negro community.
The goal of Dillard University was to fill the need for a larger, more notable Black institution of higher learning in New Orleans. The university, named after James H. Dillard, was made to offer a traditional liberal arts curriculum to the Crescent City and engage within the Black community through programs and organizations. The next school on my list is the University of New Orleans. The University of New Orleans came as a result of New Orleans being the largest metro area in the United States without a public university. UNO began as a branch of Louisiana State University called LSUNO. In 1962, the LSU system of higher education was erected and LSUNO parted to become a separate campus. It took 10 years of positive growth for the board to approve the name change to the University of New Orleans. The last school on the list is the historic St. Augustine High School. St. Augustine was created to educate young men from Black Catholic families in New Orleans. In the past, schools made for Blacks were generally torn down and understaffed. The use of negative reinforcement also stagnated young Blacks from developing in a healthy way. Notable alumni include P.J. Morton, Tyrann Mathieu, J. Electronica, McMain, Luke James, Leonard Fournette, and countless others. St. Aug believed that respect for students was priority number one. Addressing the students as Mr. instead of boy offered the positive reinforcement needed to elevate their collective mindsets. St. Aug has always maintained a tradition of discipline. This reputation was created by their use of corporal punishment. For those who don't know, it's paddling. Time magazine reported in 1965 that the atmosphere at St. Aug is warm but strict. Misbehaving students are whacked with an oak paddle. The founding principal of the school said that they achieved discipline using the Board of Education because learning wasn't possible without it. While we're on the topic of education, I want to turn my attention to a very special person who played a major role in music education in New Orleans. Lucille Hutton began teaching in the New Orleans public school system in 1916 and remained until her retirement in 1962.
She understood that having a music arts program in the school will open up another avenue for children to explore, dream of, or being introduced to different languages around the world, because opera was very big in New Orleans. Through her thesis, she used it as her blueprint, and that blueprint was the building and design of the music arts program in Orleans parishes, in the Negro schools, because they did not have a formal program, right? They didn't have a formal arts education program. So if your family had money, you were able to get private lessons, right? But when you're in a public school system, and at private schools, such as our Catholic schools, yes, they did have it, right? But we didn't have as many Catholic schools as we had more public schools. So you have a larger number of kids who did not receive a formal music education program. So when you think about Louis Armstrong grew up in New Orleans, but he didn't receive his formal music education program from public schools because they didn't have it here.
Wow.
So her design and what she created was through 53 schools. Her arts education program, this blueprint she started, was in all of these schools. 53 schools.
Her work included creating and managing music education systems for public school students. I always wondered why band culture in New Orleans was such a big deal. Lucille Hutton ensured that teachers knew how to educate the students in music, which empowered our communities. Dr. Smith has been researching Lucille's work for years, so make sure that you tune into our full sit-down with her to gain more insight. I'll link it below. The last landmark worth mentioning is one of my favorite streets in the city. Frenchman Street is where all of the locals go to get away from the tourist trap that is Bourbon Street.
Well, first and foremost, Frenchman is for the locals. That's like local. It's not even like a local Bourbon Street. It's just like a place where all the locals can go and hang out and chill. When I was working in retail in the French Quarter, people would always come in, oh, where should we go? Where should we go? So I'm like, I don't want to tell them to go to Frenchman because I don't want them to go there and they say they go back to wherever they came from, tell all their friends. Now all of a sudden we got all these different people on Frenchman Street. But word get out anyway, especially when you have all the music venues and stuff like that. And it's just interesting to see how many venues that we have to choose from as far as live music, brass bands, and they have just bars. So as far as Frenchman Street, for locals, it's important for us to be able to be somewhere where we can be and not, be disturbed. We don't have to deal with the bourbon madness that is bourbon. We don't have to deal with all that. You can go from Dragon's Den to Mason to Blue Nile to Favela Chic to wherever. And the art market, you can get food at that dog, all those things. Yeah, it's a little vibe for locals, and you get to see a lot of people just in passing. It's cool, it's chill. That's what I like about Frenchman. It's chill.
Frenchman is best known for its live music venues like the Blue Nile, Snug Harbor, and a Spotted Cat. Frenchman also has an assortment of restaurants, bars, coffee shops, and local businesses. This area once belonged to Bernard Marigny, the rich Creole and political leader of Old New Orleans. Many houses in the Marigny are over 100 years old. Frenchman Street got its name from 6 Frenchmen who were executed after an uprising. Frenchman sits on some of the city's highest ground and was left virtually untouched after Hurricane Katrina. There's a lot of confusion surrounding the word Creole in New Orleans. I'm going to attempt to shed a little light on the history associated with the Creole people. There was a time in New Orleans when the majority of its residents were French-speaking Creoles. This was the norm until the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. This led to the arrival of the English-speaking Anglo-Americans and a divide that would last throughout the years. The two different groups lived on opposing sides of the city. The Creoles lived in the Marigny and Treme. This area was known for its Creole of color population, and most of them were free blacks. Due to the Creoles and Americans living on opposing sides of the canal, residents began calling the median that ran through the middle the Newtral Groundz. Till this day, New Orleans residents refer to medians as Newtral Groundz. Many people confuse Creoles with Cajuns. Cajuns are the descendants of French-Canadian refugees banished by the British from Nova Scotia in the 1750s. Someone who identifies as Creole in today's time is likely to be of mixed ancestry with deep New Orleans roots and with family members who are most likely Catholic with French surnames. Many black Creoles still reside in the 7th Ward not too far from where their ancestors lived. Although the 7th Ward is known for being relatively progressive, there was a lot of poverty and violence within its borders. When researching the dark side of the 7th Ward, it won't take long for you to come across the St. Bernard projects. The St. Bernard was named after Bernard Marigny and was known as the second largest housing projects in New Orleans.
Running through that project, playing ball.
Grew up in the project, and I know a lot of people from a lot of walks of life that come out of that. Some of them succeeded, some of them didn't. This is home to some people. The hurricane did a lot of damage, but it only did damage to one floor. And to shut the whole place down because of that is wrong. You got hundreds of people that won't have nowhere to live.
During the height of the crack epidemic, the St. Bernard was averaging about 12 murders per year. This prompted locals to start referring to the St. Bernard as Dodge City. Between 2002 and 2003, there were over 25 homicides within the walls of the St. Bernard. In 2000, the census reported close to 7,000 people living within the neighborhood. 10 years later, that number has drastically decreased. In 2010, it was reported that 974 people were residing within the St. Bernard.
I have no regrets about my living in the housing development because at the time it was a safe place for us to live. It was a place that kept us housed when we didn't have to live on the street. I don't knock the projects because I'm from them. At first, coming through it's a kind of eerie feeling because of the darkness. I've been through this project when people lived in it, hanging on the corners, block parties, everything like this. Even though there was a lot, may have been a lot of crime here, but like they say, there's no place like home. That's true. To say that we was displaced and we were sent to Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, some in California. Right now, Louisiana people are in 8 different states. And everybody wants to return home.
After being closed down, the projects were renamed Columbia Park. Since the name change, the crime rate has dropped by 73% as of 2013. Because of how deep-rooted this story is, I'll go into more detail in our future documentary on the St. Bernard projects. Make sure you like that if you want to see it. Now let's get into some of the notable people in society that call the 7th Ward home. I'm about to list a few names and then go into details about a few of my favorites. Famous 7th Ward New Orleanians include Leonard Fournette, Luke James, A.P. Turo, Ray Nagin, Tyron Matthew, Mia X, Manny Fresh, Jelly Roll Morton, Anthony Mackie, and Young Greatness. The first person that I want to highlight is the Mama Mia X. She is a multi-platinum selling recording artist, mother, and chef. Mia X rose to fame through the historic No Limit run led by Master P. Mia X managed to make a name for herself in the male-dominated industry, cementing herself in hip-hop history. She is also a very talented chef and has her own seasoning available for purchase at teamwhipthempots.com. The next person on the list, of course, is Manny Fresh. He is single-handedly responsible for the sound of Cash Money Records. He also let everyone outside of New Orleans know what a 7 Wall hardhead was.
So we come up together, you know, we are like real family. But DJ WAP had a cousin that came from Queens.
Okay.
And his name was Denzel. And he brought mixtapes back from New York. He was an MC, and he really encouraged Manny and WAP to start this crew. So they started a crew called New York Incorporated.
I remember that, yeah, okay, yeah.
They used to give dances and parties everywhere. One of the hot spots was the Pentagon on AP2 Road. They started renting that space out. So as teens, we would go there. We had a lot of little places to go to as teenagers. I feel sorry for the young people now because we had a lot of things to do.
As teens. Yeah.
So we would go to the Pentagon, and one night they was like, "We're looking for an MC. I want to know, can any of y'all rap?" So my cousins was like, "Go, Mia, go." So I got up there. I had never told Manny and WAP that I knew how to rap. I got up there and rapped. Manny was like, "You want to be with us?"
Manny Fresh doesn't get enough recognition in my opinion. He paved the way for most of the producers in the game today and helped give New Orleans a fighting chance in music.
We got way too many people that got creative say so when they shouldn't have it.
Fact.
It's like, you know, if you're in the studio and you know you doing this and the people who you doing it with, who are your people? Let them people do their job. But you know, it's becoming homie business where it's just like the dude on the side like, man, that ain't gangsta enough. I don't know what you're talking. Like, dude, do you do music?
Yeah.
What's your background? You sell hot dogs? I'm not telling you nothing about these ain't the right weenies. Music is supposed to be a moment, like, and what I mean is if it becomes something where it's like destructive and it's crazy, then that ain't the right people who you doing it with. Like, you know what I'm saying? When we do this, we get together, it's supposed to be a good time in doing it.
Right.
That's gonna come across in the record. That's gonna come across in the music. And if it's just like, well, you could tell if we ain't getting along, we beefing, our songs start something like that.
AP2 Road was a leader who will always be remembered in New Orleans and Black history. He was the lawyer for the NAACP in New Orleans during the Civil Rights Movement and was responsible for ending Jim Crow segregation in New Orleans. AP2 Road's story is powerful because it shows the possibility of systemic change through education and knowledge implementation. The next man on the list is Jelly Roll Morton. The Creole, ragtime, and jazz pianist paved the way for many artists of his day, and his story deserves an individual video piece that we're actually working on right now. He is a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Louisiana Music Hall of Fame. Morton started out playing the piano in brothels like Storyville and took on the name Jelly Roll, which was Black slang for the female genitalia. He was born in the Marigny and was put out of the house when his grandma found out that he was playing in a brothel. She said that he had disgraced the family name. He went on to become one of the most influential jazz pianists in history.
I look at it like, anywhere you go at, it's gonna be some drama, it's gonna be hate. But there ain't gonna be no hate like, you know, the city where you from. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm faced with it every day. You know what I'm saying? You just gotta, you know, I just keep on moving. I just keep working. I give them some more stuff to hate about. I'm just being real with you.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really give a fuck about that. You know, they're gonna talk, they're gonna say whatever they wanna say. You know what I'm saying? You know, you just have to keep the real genuine people around you and keep some savages around you, because if they get on some savage shit, you just gotta be ready to get back on some savage shit with them. You know what I'm saying? I just was raised like that. You shouldn't fear no man but God.
The next mention on the list is Young Greatness. Young Greatness, born Theodore Joseph Jones III, was a 7th Ward rapper from New Orleans. He was one of the few new rappers from New Orleans to see commercial success. After Katrina, Young Greatness moved to Houston, Texas to find refuge. He stayed in Houston for 3 years and he loved it. Houston became a second home to him. After meeting his manager, he signed a deal with Coach K and P over at Quality Control Records, an Atlanta power label rooted in cash money and no limit culture. Things turned bad for YG in 2018 when he was hit outside of a Waffle House while getting something to eat in New Orleans one night. He didn't make it. He was one of the few to make it out of the city, and to see it end like this was disheartening. This story is really detailed and I have another video about it, so make sure you visit that if you want a full scope of the situation. The last mention on my list is Super Bowl champion Tyrann Mathieu. Tyrann Mathieu is a New Orleans native from the 7th Ward who has always had dreams of making it big. He is a safety from New Orleans who attended St. Aug High School, where he first received national attention. During his senior year alone, he recorded 32 tackles, 5 interceptions, 1 sack, and a fumble recovery. After his grandfather passed away, he was adopted by his uncle Tyrone and his aunt Sheila. Things were smooth until Hurricane Katrina, when they lost it all. They were homeless for a year, and Mathieu would eventually become a top prospect for LSU's Tiger football program until he was removed and shamed for failing 2 marijuana drug tests. He would eventually go on to get drafted into the NFL and play for 2 teams before winning the ring. We also have a full story on Tyrann Mathieu, so if you want to check that out, make sure you hit the link above.
You lost families, you lost friends, you lost relatives, you lost because people got displaced. The first thing I would be concerned about is how we preserve the people who have fought, bled, and died and stayed through all of the pollution that bridge has created, all of the discomfort that it has created.
This brings us to what I call the end of the potential of the 7th Ward. The story of North Claiborne Avenue is etched into our memories as New Orleanians. Claiborne was once the neutral ground for the Treme, the oldest black neighborhood in the United States. In the 1950s, Claiborne was known for its azalea gardens and oak trees. During Mardi Gras, Claiborne would be filled with campers waiting for the parades to emerge and masking Indians walking down, parading the suits that they took years to make. The black business district emerged on Claiborne when Jim Crow laws prevented blacks from shopping at white stores. Research from the New Orleans Tribune revealed the forgotten funeral for American slavery that took place on Claiborne after the 13th Amendment was passed. Pioneers like Walter L. Cohen and James Vance Jr. laid the foundation for Claiborne's transformation into a thriving business district for black culture and enterprise. Leaders like Cohen and Vance saw the need for black political representation in New Orleans. Once these 2 men passed, there weren't any people behind them to ensure the representation in our local politics. The government took advantage of our lack of representation. Most of the plans to elevate the highway over North Claiborne were already in motion before the residents could act. This was all a part of the government's plan to replace black neighborhoods with large-scale infrastructure projects. What many people don't know is that white residents were able to prevent an elevated highway in front of the St. Louis Cathedral. There were countless protests, but it was too late. Now the only thing that remains on Claiborne are paintings on the pillars depicting what once was. In conclusion, the 7th Ward has a very rich history that will be revisited in a sequel to this documentary. I honestly couldn't fit in all of the information necessary, so it's imperative that I break this up so that y'all can get a full scope of the 7th Ward. So appreciate y'all for sticking around with us for another one. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to watch the other videos that we dropped. And if you want to catch some behind the scenes of the editing process to see what it really took for me to create this documentary, I actually streamed a couple times while I was creating it, so you can go check those streams out too. Really encourage y'all if y'all want to get another scope on, how we created the actual project. And until next time, I see y'all.
Growing up in the Magnolia was like growing up anywhere else. Like, you know what I'm saying? A few trials and tribulations, things we went through. Probably a lot more rougher though.
But then there's this other side of the project. The people put you in these conditions.
By me being in a Magnolia, I call my style off the post flow.
I've been dining on the jail since I was 4, 5, 6, 7 in the project.
If you never knew and you never understood, it was a science to no limit.
We went to the table, he was selling CDs, cassettes, stuff like that, right? I went and bought a CD from him.
Big time, I feel like I got a little plug. Being on No Limit.
In Master P's case, No Limit sponsored the show for the whole year, so that's 360 days. The show was coming on 6 times a week.
Nobody will never ever, have the deal that he had when he struck a prod.
Now you caught up in that song is in your mind. It's gonna get you. If you didn't like it, you're gonna like it.
We don't stop. I thought we told you, nigga, we don't stop. We true soldiers, we don't stop. We true soldiers.